Hello there, welcome to a Second Thoughts overview of Belegar Ironhammer of the Dwarfs. I played through the initial turns and got a feel for the faction. As I drew my conclusions, I am now going to discuss those and help you guys plan out your playthroughs. In the end, I'll give you the army compositions that I believe I would like to try with this faction overall. Not an in-depth guide, of course, but will certainly help you out. Without wasting any more time, let's play with Belegar. So for our short victory condition, we need to destroy the factions of the Crooked Moon, Mutinous Gits, the Crooked Moon, Pan Moors. Let me find them. So basically, these Mutinous Gits are in Caracate Peaks. Crooked Moon is nearby, but it'll most likely go over there, and Clan Moors as well. This is a race, and you're starting in last place. You also need to control, guess what? Caracate Peaks. It's all about this in this campaign. You also need to occupy Loot Razor 30 different settlements. Now, achieving this will reward you with +3 hero capacity. Just a note, it's important not only to ensure that you can always get a few more scouts to have you in your armies, but also because you already start with a few here. So yeah, it's definitely important for you to have a few more capabilities because you start with a few heroes. Now, in essence, there are really two ways to focus this. Either you rush as soon as possible to Caracate Peaks, or you try to consolidate your initial area before going there. Either way, just ensure that you have a plan for it. That's my take on it. You'll certainly have some fun by trying to consolidate first, and you'll have some fun trying to figure out how you can rush it. It's up to you. Now, the long victory, let's move on. It's basically the same one for all the dwarfs. Achieve the short victory conditions, occupy Loot Razor 70 different settlements, and to ensure that the total severity of grudges in the Great Book of Grudges is no greater than 9. Currently it's 12, so it's kind of fine actually. Current total severity is 12 and 8. Okay, this it's probably not 9. It's probably here. It's under 19. Guess what? That's probably what it means. But well, nevertheless, this needs to be ensured. If you achieve this, the rewards are with +10 hero recruit rank. It's useful, of course, to ensure your powerful heroes are even better right as you recruit them. Now, Belegar has Angered Ancestry, which means that he suffers a huge penalty, +50% upkeep until Caracate Peaks is recaptured. You also start with 4 Clan Angered Ancestor heroes. These are massively... It's so unique, it's so cool, because those allow a lot of greater flexibility in the beginning. You also have a unique building chain available at Caracate Peaks, and you gain leadership +10 when laying siege or encircling anyone. The attribute Vanguard deployment during underway battles is of course always excellent. Now, in terms of climates, that's a little bit of a problem. So let me show you, like here. It's average to good, let's say. So the reason for it is that you can actually have a massive foothold. You know, you can imagine you're controlling all of this and there's no uninhabitable other than Ethelloran here. But if you try to go for full domination, or if you try to go for the New World, you'll have some severities, severe issues with the uninhabitable climate. But for the most part, I'll say let's put this on good in terms of climate. Several complications that will have with unpleasant, but for the most part you can conquer a long, massive a piece of land, of course. So as you can see here, the penalties for climates, of course, the typical ones, but always note the casualty replenishment rate, and that's what influences most of the issues. Of course, the income from buildings being reduced, that's also a pain, but yeah, always be mindful of these, as they will definitely hinder your playthrough in different areas of the map. So your starting location is a 3-settlement province, but you start in a minor settlement. It will take some time to get to the province capital too, which makes this already a kind of difficult start position. So you start with these 4 ancestral heroes, basically. They are ethereal, they have several specific ones. These are powerful, insane buff in both campaign and battle. They're most likely the ones that will carry you in the early game for quite some time. Now, typical expansion is one of 2 routes. Either you try to rush, just conquer the one province and then rush it for Caracate Peaks, or you try to consolidate. Both of these are very they're mutually exclusive, of course. They can change drastically how everything plays out, and it's not wrong or which one you choose. Just be sure that you have, like I said before, a plan for it. However, both indicate that you must at some point conquer the Carrick 8 Peaks. So for certain, typical expansion will always imply going there in the last place. Essentially, it's a key point for the expansion route of Clan Angrand. You're part of the Order Tide. So typically the Empire factions, especially the Border Princes here, Bretonnia factions, the other Dwarfs of course, and an incognito in terms of the Wood Elves as well, they'll be your typical friends. Now, whether the proximity with the Wood Elves may cause them to, attack, of course, so keep an eye on them, try to appease them, maybe give them a settlement or anything, keep fighting their enemies, etc. Typical enemies will be initial greenskins, Skaven and the Beastmen nearby, Vampire Coast over here, the Ogres as well over there. So you're in the middle of several legendary lords, so be wary of those, be on guard for those. And it's quite a crowded area, so be careful. In terms of outposts, you can still count with the typical. In this case, I would go for Empire with their cavalry, typical cavalry as well from the Wood Elves, maybe they're single entities, they're flying single entities, that's what I refer, and maybe the Bretonnia with their cavalry and flying units. Flyers are just such a good addition to the dwarf roster. Typically, they do have the gyrocopters, but they are very weak in combat, so if you have something to support them already in the air, it's really good. Of course, cavalry, I don't need to speak too much. They have none, so of course that will be a good idea for sure. The Forge is a crafting mechanic, basically, that allows you to build a variety of items, from weapons, armor, talismans, enchanted items. And then we also have, of course, these range from basic items to fairly unique ones with several specific abilities that would change the way how that faction plays out, definitely, or how that army plays out, not faction, army, thank you. We also have character runes and banner runes. So character runes are of course assigned to characters. These will improve them, they will allow them to be, for instance, bonus versus large, to have some more ward save, to have then some more specific stuff such as weapon strength plus 50%. So maybe you want to gift it to someone that is going to be fighting Skarbrand, that sort of idea. Although I don't know why, but still, you may want that. In terms of banner runes, it's the other way around. They'll go for assigned units. In particular, do note that you get these +3, so you can get increases bonus versus large and enables projectiles to home in on targets for artillery units. So you can imagine that you give these to your already anti-large artillery units, and they'll home in their targets. They'll become much better. So sometimes when you're considering the composition, especially in the end when I consider the compositions, remember that this drastically changes even low quality troops, low quality units, in how they can play out. So you should always remember, oh, maybe I can use that artillery unit with this, that sort of idea. So that's another thing that I really like about this customization option, because you can make certain units or certain heroes, for instance, really powerful with just a couple of or items there. Now, the second mechanic that I want to talk about is the Great Book of Grudges. It's a nice mechanic. Basically, it consists of missions. For instance, now you need to capture and occupy Carrick 8 Peaks. And if I conclude that, the reward will be, it will say here, that I'll be in control of Carrick 8 Peaks. Of course, it is already one specific one. But for instance, for this one, to win 5 battles against the fallen faction of Crooked Moon, I'll gain the Master Rune of Spite and some Oath Gold. So these are several missions that you need to achieve, but there's a specific thing to them. This bar, which is bigger here, you can see that the buffs that it gets are depending on how many grudges you have. So unsettled grudges are bad for you, therefore you need to keep settling them in order to satisfy your people. That will incur with those buffs more control, more research rate, construction cost reduction faction-wide, and diplomatic relations. These will seriously become debuffs, so be wary of that. The only thing that you gain there is charge bonus to all armies and a very high chance of slayers. So the more grudges, the more people will take the Slayer Oath. And of course that may be a good thing or a bad thing depending on your playstyle and what you wish to aim, but just try to keep them as low as possible as you can, of course, especially to benefit from those buffs. Another specific mechanic is basically the rune magic of swords. As you can see, I have selected my runesmith here. He has some magic. I'll start the battle, just a custom battle basically. And of course you have these runes, and note that they don't cost winds of magic, of course. You have a different idea. After a character uses a rune, of course, it will go on a lengthy cooldown. So for instance, let me say that I want the rune of speed to affect these gyrocopters. I want them to go fast, I want them to attack, so I want them to go really much faster, but you can see that he cannot cast anything until the cooldown goes away. So of course this is an effect that will affect multiple casters as well, so be wary of that. You have to really choose when to use the runes, but they're fairly impactful. You know, I have some nice buffs, a little bit of a magic explosion here. Strong as a single unit, it's nothing too fancy, let's say, but there's definitely a couple of those that you'll need to be wary of, as of course they will help you out. More on that later on, basically. So once you capture Karak H peaks, of course, you benefit from the fact that you no longer have the upkeep issue. So plus 50% upkeep if you would wish. Then we have some specific buildings, such as the Grand Underway Junction. It gives you some casualty replenishment rate, growth to all provinces, some upkeep to Iron Breakers in our armies. Generally very good buffs, especially income from trade tariffs, always excellent, of course. And we also have the Ancestor Tombs. Now, this enables, the Ancestor Weapons enables magical attacks for all units, all armies in this province, and all adjacent provinces. So it makes it so that, you know, once you capture, you can easily conquer nearby lands just because you have all those magical attacks, for instance, especially against any demon factions that may show up, like Khorne, for instance. This will be tremendously helpful. And of course it doesn't hurt that you get +4 recruit rank for any infantry units and the control. So basically this means that easily Karak 8 Peaks can become your central stage of military production. It's only saddening that it does have only 2 settlements in the province, but still it will this counts sort of like a mechanic, because of course you get the upkeep back and suddenly you have a very good staging ground area, you know, in order to which expand nearby, of course. So for your province edicts, it consists of growth, construction cost reduction, and some tradable resources. You can also have a control and corruption for any issues that you may have. You also have income from all buildings, and recruitment cost and local recruitment capacity +1. I would love if this was +2, it would be making it much more effective, especially for the dwarfs, but we can have everything. Those are already very good options, basically. Now, in terms of army stances, of course the classical underway, this is really good for the dwarfs. It allows them to traverse different terrain. It honestly allows them to traverse the ocean, so it's really cool as well. And immunity for attrition, of course, some ambush defense chance, and note the vanguard deployment for the Lord's army. That's also excellent. Now, you also have Encamp, enables replenishment, access to global recruit pool, and immune to most attrition. You have the raiding, which doesn't generate oath gold. I would love if it would, but immune to most attrition, of course, and of course the income. Both of these cost the 50% movement, nothing too fancy there, and ambush by 25%. So pretty straightforward ones, nothing that would be more into the faction or anything like that. Just be wary of, you know, being caught in forced march, the typical ones, or use underway to your own discretion. Remember, they can intercept, that sort of idea. In terms of buildings, so Karak Izor has a unique copper mountain which gives gold and growth, as well as very nice recruit buffs. In addition, your ranges building, as you can see here, has some additional assistance here as the campaign line of sight and campaign movement range, and it's excellent to also use those units early in the game because typically these are tier 3, so now they're tier 1. So your full military requires at least 7 buildings if you consider this for the Thane, you know, for a little bit more hero capacity, hero recruits, but I would say 6 buildings, and only 2 of them can be built in minor settlements. However, tier 2 and 3 units can already surprise you. I've mentioned this before. Even basic infantry has a great staying power with the Longbeards, even with the Dwarf warriors. Miners with blasting charges and quarrelers, they're very good missile troops. You have some decent artillery already, including the cannons and grudge throwers. You can do a lot with just those. Even the thunderers and iron drakes, they're excellent missile troops. Bugman's rangers and rangers will be more focused in this faction as well. You also have slayers, so tier 4 just improves on these. Of course, they're really good, but the tier 2 and 3 units, they're already very good for any dwarf player. In terms of infrastructure, we have growth and replenishment, income generation, we also have control and some resource production, and then a jack of all trades, like I like to say. It's always nice to have this sort of building. Produces oath gold, income from trade tariffs and tradable resources faction wide, and also income from all buildings. Always nice. Now, contrary to the initial location of Thorgrim and Ungrim, you're lacking some of the initial mines that they have that assist them. You have some iron mines there and such, but you're lacking the initial mines, so be mindful of that. Your upkeep combined with the lesser income may provide quite a challenge. Now, research is quite, as I've mentioned before, one of the best around. It will take ages to finish, as you can see the turns there just to reach that one. So ensure that you get all of the research buffs. They will always help, and in the long run, and choose well your next research, for it will take time. It's good to go for something like upkeeping an income in terms of the Clan Angrund in the early game, but nothing wrong with you just, you know, getting some more ammunition, getting some more recruit rank. Just make sure it is exactly what you are aiming for, of course. As always, we have your Lord-specific skills, your yellow line, or caster, or melee. In this case, for the Dwarfs, is mostly the melee. Red line, or army, and then blue line, or campaign. Starting with the blue line is it's actually expensive, I would say, without a very good buffs in the initial stage. Of course, in the later stages, you do have the replenishment rate. You don't have income upkeep reduction, which is sad. You do have research rate here, so for the most part you'll always benefit from getting, you know, some replenishment. Maybe you'll invest in Lightning Strike and Inquiring Mind, just so that you can, you know, advance in that research very easily, of course. Now, in terms of red line buffs, it's probably one of the best in the game. Good compositions and alternatives without spending too much. For Belegar in itself, because he buffs early game troops, such as the miners, for instance, then it may be an issue, but of course you can always benefit from those, you know, are in the mid game, into the mid game. So it's just 3 points, really. It's not that much. You know, Belegar would definitely enjoy 50 on its level 50, he will benefit, enjoy from everything that you can give him, but not for 3 points that you're not going to have, you know, a good one. So, a good choice of skill points, of course. So, yeah, definitely very good skill points in terms of the red line. I'll show you a little bit more in the nearest, in the next part, basically. So, what I want to talk about now is heroes. Unfortunately, let me just show you here. Unfortunately, there's no hero that actually provides any sort of replenishment. However, it's not that they are not useful. So, for instance, the runesmiths always have one in your army because they will have the sharpened weapons or the hardened armor. Okay, when you embed them, do note that you have to re-embed them to gain those benefits. Be mindful of that, okay? Because the typical one is scouting, and then if you choose these ones, they are not applied until you actually rejoin the army, okay? I learned that the hard way. And yeah, those are very good benefits. Of course, he has the magic, so always a good way of, ensuring that your army has some buffs. And of course, the Master Engineer is also excellent. Not only increases mobility and boosts his income, but also has specifically invaluable abilities to help other ranged units. So yeah, definitely in terms of heroes, they have very good choices. Sadly, nothing that focuses on replenishment as I like, but well, we can't have it all, can we? So here are the red line skills for the Dwarfs I've spoken before. So they have good basic to tier 3 units at first. Then nearly all missile infantry units here. Then some good elite combos such as the Iron Drakes with the flame cannon, which is always excellent. They have most elite troops here, and then the artillery. So the combinations here are very effective, basically. But some combos, of course, may prove not worth it, of course. Now, Belegar does give some good buffs to the early game, basically, and also specifically against Skaven, specifically against greenskins. You have several buffs there. He goes for rangers, bolt throwers, and miners, so of course we can have some combinations with that. Instead of going to typical quarrelers and thunderers, just try with the Bugman's rangers and these rangers with great weapons for some armor piercing. Why not? This is sort of an early game. Nothing here is is over tier 3. So this is sort of an early game composition that you can use, trying to, reach out to dominate the early game, trying to reach out to get a solid foothold, or going into Karakate Peaks. It's up to you, of course. You can try to rush it, but if not, this is a good army composition to try and reach. Of course, the bolt throwers is mainly to get advantage of this missile strength, and not a melee attack. It's not like they require it, but still. And of course, note that these are mostly for anti-large, maybe to fight some ogres, to fight some trolls or something like that. These would be nice. But of course, nothing wrong with developing a much better army composition with him later on. Okay. This is sort of a thematic approach, as in if you're going with the bolt throwers, because the same skill level applies to also gyrocopters and gyrobombers, well, why not? Why not giving a few? Of course, the number of units here you can differ. These heroes are probably most likely going to be the ancestral ones, so that alone makes a difference. So yeah, try different compositions. Just bear in mind that you can always try to focus down the sort of idea that he gives you with the miners, with the rangers, bolt throwers, etc. Okay, and these are the sort of bread and butter types of combinations that I would give. Note how effective those are in terms of red line skills that you would need. Lots of different comps. I'd say that for the most part I like to engage with some Iron Drakes or Thunderous Quarrelers, so steadily dividing into this, either the ranged units from here or the ranged units from there, that's the sort of idea, instead of mixing them up. But yeah, not a problem if you try to mix both types of units up. It's up to you. Always with some iron breakers, some hammers. Ever since the changes, they're so invaluable. So yeah, that's up to you. Of course, some early game compositions, as you can see here. Of course, with some late game units here. This is kind of a different take with the one that I showed you with Belegar, of course with Quarrelers, but nothing wrong with you getting some rangers there, especially because they're tier 1. So these are what I consider the kind of sweeper armies, very cheap, effective armies that you can use to, you're not going to send them against the stack of Chosen, but you can send them against some average armies and even settlements and benefit from those, and they're just cheaper. That's the whole idea behind them. Note how, again, redline skills, how effective they are in the amount of redline skills that you need to buff all of those units in the army. As a final conclusion, a very unique campaign, focused solely on the race to Karak 8 Peaks, right there. So, in essence, either you rush the race or you consolidate first, whatever you choose, it will definitely already feel different than any other Dwarven campaign. The early game ancestor heroes and Belegar himself are already quite nice to have a different army composition, and the experience that you'll have with that. Try to focus his abilities, and against Skaven and Greenskin enemies for maximum value. Now, your army consists of great infantry, great artillery and missiles, average flyers, no cavalry, no single entities, and no typical magic. Replenishment is average to good. There's really no hero to assist, but climate may yet help in that regard, particularly in the early game and in this area. Now I believe it is time for you to join the race for Carrack 8 Peaks with the true king, Belegar Ironhammer.